moving on from that,
Yes.
from the Flash, moving into the future of DC, which is the upcoming Batman v Superman, which is coming next month in March, which is strange because this movie has been being talked about for like 3 years, and it's like you never think it's gonna happen, and then it's a month away.
Like
So,
Deadpool.
like Deadpool, or like I don't know, pick any superhero movie that's happening, and the fact that it's happening at all is a miracle.
Wonder Woman.
But Wonder Woman is happening next year. Think about that.
Yeah.
So Batman v Superman. I'll start by saying I feel like a lot of people are very nervous about this movie, and I can understand the justification as to why that is because this is something that has actually never been done with these specific characters. Like we've had Avengers, we've had 2 Avengers movies now, we've had individual superhero movies, we have the MCU, so we have an integrated movie universe. But with Batman and Superman specifically, that's a whole other thing because these are 2 of the biggest characters in the world, pretty much, like more so than Captain America or Iron Man. Well, maybe now with the MCU, that's a little bit of a different story, but up until then, Batman and Superman were the most popular and kind of the biggest names in any comic book hero.
Avengers kind of flipped it over to, like, weren't the Avengers or way back in the day kind of B-list superheroes?
Yeah, back when they, like, if you looked at the individual roster, you'd go like, it's kind of like it seems like a B team of, like, if you were comparing them to like the Justice League, you'd go like, wow, they like this is like who you call when the Justice League's busy, like they're busy, like, you know, fighting aliens in space. I guess we'll call the Avengers. I mean,
And now the Defenders are going to be that for the Avengers.
pretty much, yeah. It's like, oh fuck, the Avengers are off fighting in like Yugoslavia or something, so we have to call in the Defenders, and like
They got to take a plane. It's going to be a little while.
It's, I think Daredevil got lost in New York, so Iron Fist is here and Luke Cage because Jessica Jones couldn't be bothered, and
She's still drunk.
She's still sleeping off the hangover. So so what do you need us to do? This building's burning down. We can punch the building. I mean, we can. That's the most I think we can do right now. Send complaint letters to our PO box. We'll get to them later.
Ironically, in Yugoslavia.
Anyway, yeah, located in Yugoslavia, headquarters of the Avengers, because no one would think to look in Yugoslavia. So
That's so wrong. I think Daredevil got lost.
what I was saying it, and then as I was saying it, I was like, I shouldn't go there, but I did. So going back to Batman v Superman, a lot of people were nervous about this movie. Some people like me are optimistic. I really think that DC is kind of going all in. They're not doing what Marvel did with like individual movies to set up each character and then do the big team up. They're kind of like just going all in with, like, they're introducing Batman, Superman has already been introduced to Man of Steel, but they're bringing him back. Wonder Woman is getting introduced. There's supposedly going to be cameos by like Aquaman and the Flash and Cyborg, so it's going to be like a whole it's going to be basically like a mini Justice League by the end of it, and then they're going to have an actual Justice League movie later, but this movie has a lot riding on it, and I feel like they're putting everything they can into doing it, and I like most of what I've seen so far. My nervousness mainly just comes from it wanting to be good, because I don't want this to like fall apart, and then like they'd really have to do a lot of damage control after that if this movie doesn't. I mean, it's probably gonna do well financially, but critically and like with fans, they really need to win people over to get people excited. And I want people to be like, I want this to be good so people will be excited for the future DC, and Marvel doesn't. I stay like I love what Marvel's doing, but I kind of also want to diversify the playground, if that makes sense. Like
Yeah.
I don't want Marvel to just be like the monopoly on this sort of thing. Like I want, because competition breeds improvement, breeds success. And so if you have two cinematic universes that are both doing well, I think both will continue to up their game, so to speak. So, but that's my thoughts generally about Batman v Superman. What are your thoughts?
I'm with you. I'm cautiously optimistic. Trailers looked interesting. Kind of looked like there might be, even though it's all super dark at night, a
Yeah.
lot of rain. It does feel like there's going to be maybe a little more sense of humor to it. At least there's a clip with Wonder Woman appears. Like, I thought she was with you.
I think like the there's been like a misconception about, like, I think like tonally speaking, I feel it is kind of a more like serious movie than Avengers. Like if you're comparing Avengers and Batman v Superman just in like color palette alone, it's very like much more moody and dark, and rainy clouds and kind of dark lighting. But I feel like there's still room for it to be like more fun and still an entertaining movie to watch, and not just like either boring or too like heavy for people. I feel like there's still room for it to be more than that.
Yeah. Talking about like DC hoping to make their own cinematic universe. And I don't consider this a point against them necessarily, but they are trying very hard to play catch up to what Marvel's
Yeah,
done.
it's really like not like a negative. It's just a fact, kind of, in terms of, because literally speaking, they did start later. So.
Yeah, and they've had kind of a patchy start. Man of Steel, I've heard very mixed things about it. Personally, it doesn't seem like something I'd be especially interested in. It seems more like a Batman movie, because I know it was a Christopher Nolan movie, wasn't it?
Well, it was a Chris Nolan produced movie, but it was directed by Zack Snyder,
Okay.
who is directing this movie. But yeah, I did get mixed reviews. I saw it the first time I saw it. I wasn't 100% sure on my thoughts on it. And then after seeing it again, I grew to like it more and more for what it was. I think like putting expectations or thoughts of what a Superman movie is quote unquote supposed to be, saying like from the eyes of like people who critiqued it because they felt it didn't feel like as much of a Superman movie as they wanted. I think as a movie on its own, I think it worked, and it's better the more I think about it and like look into it. You're right; it was a very patchy start for them to start with Man of Steel, but I feel like this could be kind of a redemption for them and could really get the ball rolling for them to do more.
Well, the problem is they're introducing all of these characters in this. This is a new Batman. It's not the Dark Knight
Personally,
Batman.
Batman, yeah.
One of the complaints with Man of Steel is there's plenty of talk about what Superman is supposed to be. There's not a whole lot of character development for Clark.
Yeah, that's something that they did have a problem with, not just like their take on Superman, but like how it was presented. Like they thought there should have been more growth for Clark as a character, but that there was like there's a lot of exposition about who he is to become or who he is to be, but it's not a lot. It's more like told and not shown kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that's a fair criticism. Hopefully, with Batman v Superman, it gets everyone more on the same page on Clark's character, and we see a shift in him, especially if he's against Batman throughout most of this movie. At some point, they have to come together, we'd assume. So how does that come about? That's going to be interesting to see.
Yeah. But also, they have to develop who Batman is a character, and Wonder Woman, and Aquaman,
Yeah.
and whoever the villain is.
That's the main. I think that's where a lot of people's concern comes from. I feel like it's mainly from like you have to introduce a lot in this movie. Like introduce us to a new Batman who's not Christian Bale, so you have to start from scratch with that.
And it's ironically
Wonder
enough the guy who played Daredevil previously.
yeah. So it's gonna be redemption for him as well. So there's that, and then with Wonder Woman and Aquaman and Flash and all that, I feel like those are gonna be like Wonder Woman might have a bigger role. Like the three of them are probably gonna be like Batman and Superman are like the main characters, I would assume, and then Wonder Woman's kind of like a supporting player, but not like the main focus.
Right.
So I'm assuming like there's not gonna be like a ton of character development devoted to her. Plus, she's getting her own movie, so they might save some of that for that movie. But then you have Aquaman and Flash and Cyborg, which I would assume are more like cameos, kind of like here's who's coming, but they're not there yet, sort of thing. Like they're introduced, but they're not really like delved into, which I think would make more sense. But they also they have to worry about the villain, and so who and what's their motivation and how they figure into the story, and they have to, so they're kind of building a whole universe in one movie.
And it's a big gamble, because if you don't make those characters interesting right now, when eventually when the movies comes out, are they going to be interesting? Especially with Wonder Woman, because we've been aching for a female superhero movie for forever. We still don't have Black Widow, but we're finally getting Wonder Woman.
Exactly, yeah. So they really need to nail Wonder Woman because she's an incredibly important female character, and really is the most important female character in comics ever.
I think,
So
I've always thought of her as like the DC superheroine.
Yeah, pretty much. So when we see her in Batman v Superman, we need to be invested in her. We need, or at least be interested. Like we need to see her and be like, oh my god, like I want to see more of her. And so then that makes people more excited for Wonder Woman, because if they botch it in Batman v Superman, then they have a huge uphill battle of trying to get people interested in the Wonder Woman standalone movie.
They might end up making their own self-fulfilling prophecy where people don't want to see female superheroes, which is only perpetuated by people who make bad female superhero products.
Yeah, it's like okay, so you make it's like if the first Batman movie you make was the quality of like Catwoman, you no one would be interested in Batman. Like it's just like they did that with Batman and Robin. No one was interested. They had to get Chris Nolan to come in like 8 years later and fix it. So like you can't if you want female superhero movies to be profitable, you have to make them good. But people don't want to make them because they feel they make no money because the ones they made already are not good. So it's like you need to invest in making good movies surrounding these characters so that people will go out and see them, and thus we will get more female-centric superhero movies, which we desperately need. So,
and I'm almost wondering if Ant-Man and the Wasp, who's coming up further down the line, that's almost testing grounds for seeing a superhero, female superhero in a lead role. Because I was surprised at how interesting and really well acted Hope was in Ant-Man.
Yeah.
Pretty much all the characters in that movie were very well acted. It's the actors who made that movie. So I'm hoping that once we see that a superhero who isn't like Black Widow, she's part of an ensemble, but it's a duo. We get to see a female superhero in her element with a guy, obviously, but
it's kind of like baby steps in a way.
Yeah.
Like or at least for the studio, like I'd be down for just a full on Wasp movie, but if that's what it takes for them to get to the point where, I mean, they're already planning Captain Marvel, but that's not happening for like 3 more years. That like they kept delaying it to like 2019 now, so it's like it's still far off away, and Ant-Man and the Wasp is coming sooner, so it may very well be that testing ground for where they're like, can a co-lead female superhero work? And I think, and I'm sure it will. But so with Wonder Woman, DC's actually beating them to the punch with Wonder Woman, so it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
I'm absolutely sure it will work. Marvel just needs to start having faith in the people they hire to make their movies. They didn't think Guardians of the Galaxy would work. That ended up getting, what, 90 plus on Rotten Tomatoes, was a huge smash hit, and probably up there on my favorites of the MCU. They didn't think Ant-Man was going to be a hit. Pretty much everyone liked it. It made plenty of money back. They need to put their trust in the actors and their directors to do their job. And if they can do that, the movie will be fine.
Yeah, exactly. And DC needs to do the same. They need to, and I'm hoping that's what they're doing. And my hope is that they do, that they don't meld too much, that they trust in the vision of their directors, and that they will tell good stories.
Yeah. That's all we want, just good movies.
Yeah, just make good movies. With Batman v Superman, we'll see in like a month how this plays out. Because we got Suicide Squad coming in August, which we'll get to in a second.
Yeah.
And then Wonder Woman coming out next year, I believe in the summer, which is already shooting right now, so it's in production.
Okay.
It's guaranteed that Batman v Superman is going to make a lot of money just based on name alone. But if it's not well received, like say like a lot of people, like the majority of people think it sucks. Like it still makes enough money to justify them to keep making movies, but it like nobody likes it. Say that does happen. I'm wondering what will like I'm sure they'll still like come out with Suicide Squad and they'll still come out with Wonder Woman, but the movies that are further down the line, I'm wondering what the plan will be there. Will they keep trying to push forward and just hope that the next movie works, or will they kind of start slowly kind of reworking things?
Right now, all we can do is hope that the films work on their own, and then the rest will carry itself from there.
Yeah, that's a good point. At this point, if they make good enough movies, things should fall into place. Moving on from Batman v Superman to the last specific movie we'll be talking about, Suicide Squad. When I first heard about it, I thought it was an interesting idea to do this movie, especially to do it this soon, it being the next film immediately after Batman v Superman, for them to go with a movie about the villains, which I think is something that is rarely ever done in movies in general, and to do it for superhero movies specifically, I think is such an interesting idea.
It's in the same continuity as Batman v Superman?
Yeah, it's in the same world. It's, mainly a lot of Batman villains mainly are in this movie, and it's, and they were actually, like, this is supposed to, I think, take place after whatever events happen in Batman v Superman, but or around the same time. So, yeah, it's all part of DC's cinematic universe that they're building. So Suicide Squad, when it was announced, I believe Guardians of the Galaxy had already come out. So when I first heard about it, I was like, oh, so it's kind of like Guardians of the Galaxy in a way. So it's like these...
That's kind of my take on it,
Yeah, it's kind of like a ragtag group of criminals brought together for a common good. Except this time it's, it's not done of their own free will. It's because the government needs them to do it. And if not, they'll be... killed. So it's but the idea that in this movie we're getting introduced to the new Joker, that we're getting introduced to Harley Quinn for the first time in cinematic history ever since her introduction in the Batman animated series in the 90s. This movie could be something interesting. I really liked the trailer that they came out with.
The one with Bohemian Rhapsody,
Bohemian Rhapsody. Yeah, I thought it was a really fun trailer. I thought it was really, I think there's a really cool tone going on with the movie.
It basically is Guardians of the Galaxy because they're advertising it with pop music.
Yeah.
70s pop music, no less.
Yeah, it is pretty much, I wouldn't be surprised if they took their cues from that marketing campaign. What are your general thoughts and anticipations about Suicide Squad? especially given that it's not like as huge of a movie as like Batman vs Superman.
Again, like Batman v Superman, cautiously optimistic. A little more optimistic for this one, just because Guardians, like I mentioned, it's one of my favorites of the MCU. Just because it's such a
Yeah,
fun movie, and I give a lot
yeah,
of leeway. Guardians has so many issues with its pacing. Like there's one scene where like they break into Ronin's base, and
oh, yeah.
within minutes of them getting in there after this huge action scene, Groot releases all these fireflies, and it's this calm, gentle scene, and it's lovely, but it comes out of nowhere. But again, I give it a lot of leeway because it's such a fun ride, and if Suicide Squad is as fun as that, I don't mind them trying to make their answer to Guardians, because if it's about as good, that means it's going to be a really good movie. I'm a little
Yeah.
concerned. Harley Quinn, if this is the advertisers, you need to get slapped, because it seems like they're just putting nothing into her head. I'm goofy.
Yeah.
There has to be, and I know there's more to the character than that. Isn't she like a psychiatrist in the comics, or a psych?
Yeah. She's a psychiatrist who studied the Joker while he was in Arkham, and through multiple conversations and through um, just constant kind of going into her psyche, the Joker managed to kind of twist her mind, and eventually she became kind of obsessed with him and fell in love with him, and eventually she kind of cracked and became Harley Quinn.
Yeah, see, so
So
that's a very interesting story, and an
yeah,
interesting character, and she's a very intelligent character. She just lost her mind thanks to the Joker. Here it just
yeah,
looks like she's doing la di da di da dumbass.
that's something that I do have an issue with in the way that at least they're marketing it, because from what I'm hearing about the actual story of the movie, I haven't looked like super much into it because I don't want to like spoil myself,
Yeah,
but the marketing just kind of presents her as she's crazy and like that, and like she's fun and she's crazy, and that's it. But like, reading into the director's like thought process on the character about how it's a story, part of her story in this movie is about her learning to break away from the Joker, and of almost like an abuse victim kind of situation.
which is going to be hard to
It's
pull off as successfully as Jessica Jones.
Yeah, because they had a lot more just time in terms of storytelling to do
Yeah,
that. But um, I'm hoping that that they didn't do the best job at presenting her as anything more than just kind of ditzy and and just kind of voices in her head kind of situation. So um, I'm hoping that they do more than that. But
then again, marketers
uh,
never, like, aside from like Deadpool and Ant-Man, marketing tends to not be too spectacular.
no, for most movies, it's generally not like it's kind of just meant to like. There's nothing really specific or creative about, like, I'm sure there's some creativity that goes into it, but the general ideas of the marketing is not very like inventive in
It's
a
just
way.
get people into seats.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, here's a trailer, here's a TV spot. Occasionally, like, here's a poster, here's and like that's it. And that it's like, some marketing people don't go the extra mile to do something interesting. But the uh the Suicide Squad in general, really interested to see where this movie goes, what implications it has later on with the DC universe that they're building.
I actually have kind of a problem with people's reaction to one of the parts of the marketing, and not technically marketing, but the cast when they were talking about Jared Leto as the Joker. Like the cast were all saying, it's like he was not Jared Leto, he was the Joker, and then they list off kind of these almost childish, stupid things he did, which are like, don't don't play to the Dark Knight Joker, but then this
Yeah.
isn't the Dark Knight Joker. Thinking about the Batman cartoon, Joker a lot of the time was just kind of this shitty jokester. Like when Batman dies, he puts a "kick me" sign on his cape. It's like that's the kind of character
Yeah.
that the Joker is. He's dangerous, but he's also kind of an asshole.
People like to hype up the performance of the Joker specifically because he's such like an iconic character, and also when you're dealing with the kind of unfortunate past of the character in movies, specifically with Heath Ledger's Joker and kind of uh his kind of that kind of tragedy that happened. I'm sure there's some hyperbole to like what's been said about this performance, and I'm sure of any if I'm sure it's going to be a good performance. Like I'm not like worried about the performance specifically, but I am worried about overhyping it. It doesn't that all of a sudden there's an expectation there that isn't met because it's been overhyped to a certain point. So
Yeah. I think I've thought of another reason why DC has an uphill struggle here making their own universe. When the MCU started, it was just an Iron Man movie. There was a
mm-hmm.
teaser at the end, and there was probably announcements there were going to be more superhero movies, but it wasn't built up as we're making this big, huge universe. They just made an Iron Man movie, everyone liked it, and then at the end it said, we're going to be doing more, and everyone got excited. So now every
Yeah,
new movie that they made was building up to the Avengers, and that sort of
yeah,
exploded it out into its own whole universe. Whereas here, they're trying to start with an explosion. They've got a struggle ahead of them.
yeah, yeah. They do. It's difficult. They're they're also fighting against expectation of because there's a standard, a bigger standard now.
Yeah.
Because of what Iron Man and the Avengers and all that of what everything that Marvel has done is kind of set a precedent and set a standard for other people to follow an example. And DC, in at least in terms of quality, has to match that, if not exceed it, because all eyes are on them, and if they don't meet the standard that people have set up now for superhero films in general, then it's going to fall flat on its face, and it has to struggle. It has that struggle with it. I'm hoping that uh, it does. I'm hoping that it does enough different, not like completely like doesn't have to be like completely different, but that there's enough differences between the two to where it feels like they're both justified in existing. If that makes sense, where
Yeah.
it's like everything's not just on repeat, and it's not just like if Suicide Squad ends up just feeling like a second like but not as good Guardians of the Galaxy, it would be like that'd be like one disappointment. So like hopefully they're doing enough different from each other to where it feels like there's a justification for both universes existing and for me going to see all these different kind of movies and actually getting different experiences from them, while all of them being entertaining, them offering something a little different in each kind of thing.
Rob Walker, one of the guys behind the Nostalgia Critic, not the Nostalgia
Yeah,
Critic, but his brother, made an
yeah,
interesting point when they did vlogs for Daredevil, going back to Daredevil and Flash. Even though
mm-hmm.
Flash is part of the Arrowverse, as they're calling it, it's not a part of the DC cinematic universe, but it's this kind of
Yeah,
expanded universe out of the television shows. To him, Daredevil feels like a really good Batman adaptation, whereas The Flash feels like a really good Spider-Man. Who knows? It's maybe like there's some things that DC can pick up that Marvel hasn't quite hit. Maybe they can have have their own really good Thor movie.
yeah, yeah, like their own kind of take something that's along those same lines and make it more interesting. Like there's there's places for it to go, and there's things for them to do that Marvel maybe hasn't cracked yet. Like for instance, like we were already discussing, a female superhero.
Yeah,
Like they have the opportunity to really open the doors wide open for that before anyone else. So they have their own uniqueness that they can offer. I just hope they follow through on that.
I think it helps that pretty much all of the cast involved in these movies. I don't know about Ben Affleck or Henry Cavill, but I know
Mhm.
like Will Smith, a lot of the people involved in Suicide Squad, the woman who plays Wonder Woman, they're all very excited and enthusiastic about their roles, and hopefully that comes through in the films, and that there's a lot of passion that goes into them.
Because that's definitely something that carries through, that you can see on screen is a passion for the characters and a passion for the story that they're telling. They have a chance to really nail that, and I'm personally really excited to see the future for both of these companies, kind of, and where they're going to be, which actually kind of, I think, leads us to our final point, um, which I think we've kind of already, in an inadvertent way, kind of already summed up, is the future of Marvel and DC and where we think it's going to be in a few years' time. And I guess as another question to pose, is there a risk of kind of oversaturation at this point? At us, is there going to be a point where there's too much kind of superhero things overall going on that people are going to lose interest and it's going to fade, or do you think it can still go strong for a while?
I feel like we've reached the point of saturation already just with Marvel to an extent. All their films have been worth going out and seeing at the bare minimum, but there have been a
Yeah,
lot of them. I think people forget though, they're not all released within the same year. We get like two, maybe three in one year, and then the rest are
yeah,
spread out for a while. Um,
yeah,
if DC comes in and starts doing that at the same time, then it might start feeling crowded. It doesn't help that Sony is also they have X-Men.
Fox has X-Men, yeah,
Fox, right?
and
I thought it was with. I know. Sony have
Sony has
Spider-Man.
Spider-Man.
That's right. Yeah, that's why I keep mixing it up.
Yeah,
And now so does Marvel. And Spider-Man has a movie coming out with Marvel and Sony.
yeah, there's definitely a lot. I think as long as the movies are good, and are different enough from each other, they will continue to succeed. The when they start being bad, like a bunch of bad ones in a row, then they're gonna have to reevaluate everything and kind of probably back out for a while and wait for things to die down before they try doing this kind of thing again, if they ever do it again.
I think
Um,
yeah, if there are all of these companies making their own superhero movies, but they're all good, I don't think it'll necessarily mean we've been oversaturated. I think people will see it as a cinematic golden age.
yeah, I think I really do think at a certain point it's gonna be a, like, kind of a marking point in cinematic history in a way, as to the current trend of things. There, if they continue to be of quality, then really I think at this point it's become less of like a specific niche and more of a genre of movies,
Yeah.
almost kind of a subgenre of action, but with a wide scope of different genres within it. Like Ant-Man was a heist movie, Guardians of the Galaxy was like a space opera, and then you had Captain America Winter Soldier, which was like a spy thriller kind of movie. So all these different movies, as long as they keep playing with genre and being, like I said, distinct, we could signify this as a golden age. And maybe at some point things will fade, but I don't think like it'll die out and burn out forever. I think it'll just, like everything in pop culture, it'll fade and come back in different forms, and everything ebbs and flows and doesn't really ever go away. It just like kind of goes into the background, and then it, like, eventually something comes along and then it goes to the foreground again and it fades back. So
They go Icarus for a while, but then they come back stronger than ever.
yeah,
Or at
pretty
least you can
much.
hope.
And I think with that note, I think that's a great note to kind of end the podcast on. We managed to get about, in fact, around 3 hours
Yes.
of of verbal content for you guys.
You could probably split these up into separate podcasts if you want.
I probably could. I could probably just take out the Flash section and do that as a whole separate thing. We'll figure that out in editing.
Yeah.
So with all that being said, this has been a great talk. Really enjoyed talking about all this stuff with you.
I did too. I've been wanting to just sit down and discuss a lot of this stuff with someone for a long time.
Yeah, it's been really cool, and I really want to do this again sometime. Maybe with something else. Could be even non-film related. We could talk about something else entirely.
Totally.
I want to thank all you guys for listening, no matter what cut of this I do. With all that being said, I want to thank my good friend ThornBrain for joining me, and I want to thank you all for listening, and I will see you guys around. Take care.
Good night.
And good luck.